Hey, welcome to Franchise Secrets. I have Joe Attia on today. He's a good friend of mine, been in franchising for quite a while. We had a conversation a while ago, one of those open, honest conversations, and about the good and the bad about franchising. So he's like, Erik, I got some strong opinions that you might not like. I'm like, well, let's talk about it. So one, like, should you even get into franchising to begin with? Should you leave a job? Should you be an entrepreneur? If you want to be an entrepreneur, should you get into franchising? And then if it is a yes at that point, how do you find the right one? How do you de-risk getting into the right brand? So we got into all kinds of stuff, conversations that I've never had on the podcast before. I have privately, but never really on the podcast before. So I think this will be eye-opening to buyers, franchisees, and franchisors. Like, how do you really create enterprise value? How do you become more aligned with your franchisees and do things the right way? So I hope you enjoy this episode with my buddy Joe.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
Joe, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Erik. It's always good to be here and have conversations with you. I appreciate it.
What's fun about you is I think you joined the mastermind first, way back when, and then you came out and we had the Sodak shindig, and then we became friends. And that's what I think is so cool about a lot of my friends today. I wasn't friends with before COVID and the mastermind that got started. Now I've got like good friends like you. So I was just thinking about that as I was looking at you across the screen. So where do we want to go today?
Yeah, you're right. I think it is pretty cool that we have become friends through this. But we actually crossed paths before the mastermind
In
through
Vegas?
another brand that we were both a part of.
Is that in Vegas? No, that was a different brand.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
We sat in the same room. We never really talked. But we had actually no, it's not true. We had actually spoken before I got into that brand, and we were just talking about background. But then we at the their conference, we didn't meet. I saw you there. You voiced up in one of the meetings, but we didn't get a chance to talk. And then I came across you again through your podcast, and then joined your mastermind. That was in the middle of that weird time that we had. I think it was it was 2021. 2020, I think, maybe. No, it was 2021. I talked to you in the spring of 2020 is when I joined the mastermind. 2021, and we were in the middle of that casino of timeout.
That's right. Well, you and I were just trading some messages the other day, and we'll talk on the phone every now and then to talk shop. And because you're an experienced franchisee, multi-unit, multi-brand, really had a very successful exit with one of your brands, extremely successful in the world of franchising. And you and I are always talking about things that we love and the things that we hate about franchising. And so you're like, hey, I think we should talk about something about like, why even should someone even get into franchising? And then if they do get into franchising, how do you find the right one? And this isn't like a step-by-step, this is how you pick the right franchise. This is going to be kind of a fiery conversation of probably more in the trenches reality of trying to find the right brand if you choose to go the franchising route versus just opening up your own. Because I know that you've looked at a lot of different brands. You've gotten involved with several. You've had friends that got into many different brands, and you've kind of helped them like research and ask them the right questions. And, and you've seen successes and failures with a lot of different people in franchising, see brands that have been great and see brands that have been pretty stinking bad, been very bad. So that's where this conversation is coming from that history. And, let's help some people. Let's help some buyers out there. And then let's help some franchisors be better franchisors. So where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, where I want to start is, where we talked a little bit last time I talked to you about franchising in my last podcast with you. And I think one of the things I said to you, and I think surprises a lot of people, but I'm sort of anti-franchising. I've been in franchising for a while, and it's been good for me. I've learned a ton, but I don't think franchise isn't a magic pill. It's not a miracle that you get involved with and all of a sudden you just make money. It's not a guarantee. And I think that's the thing that I've been thinking about. And you've had this conversation in the last few podcasts you've had is, you need to go in with your eyes wide open. Franchising is hard. When you get into these businesses, you've got to operate well. And if you get into the right franchise and a good franchise with a good franchisor, and you define that as you want, and we'll talk about that a little bit today, and you're a bad operator, you'll fail. But if you get into the wrong franchisor as well, invest in them, but you operate really, really well and you have the ability to do that and you're more entrepreneurial, you could be successful as well. So it's aligning those things. But, I just come back to, there are so many franchises out there, and a lot of them are there just for the sake of being a franchise. I mean, you've said this yourself. People try to run a business and they get there and then they struggle and like, you know what, I'm going to franchise this thing and that's how I'm going to make money. And, that's scary that's there. And then people get into it because like, well, if they're a franchise, they must be legit. And it reminds me of, I was thinking about this. I had written down when we were talking about this thing, I said the first rule of being a franchisee is to recognize a franchisor and franchisee incentives are not aligned. And I actually think that's the second rule of choosing to be a franchise. The first rule is related to your rule when you tell franchisors the first rule of franchising is not to be a franchisor. I think the first rule of being a franchisee is to not be a franchisee.
That's good. I like that though. I like that.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that. Like, I mean, so if you go with that premise, I'm looking at leaving corporate America or buying a business and a small business off of Biz Buy Sell, or becoming a franchisee. So franchising, like, do I go the franchising route to begin with? So that's kind of the first question. And in investing, we were at the Tribe of Investors retreat a few months ago in Austin with my buddy Justin Donald, who's my business partner in that. And we were telling our members, like, you go into investment with a no, I'm not going to do this. Like, you have to convince me like this is a good investment because I'm starting with a no. And so I think as, someone that's a franchise buyer, I think it's easy for them to have misconceptions of franchising, as franchising means it's a stamp of approval or a stamp of this is going to be successful, or this is a better on-ramp into entrepreneurship than just going on my own. That may be true and it may not be true. But so what do you unpack the first rule of being a franchisee?
You've got to really be on point about why you are looking to buy a business and why you're looking to buy a franchise business, or not even just buy a business, but open a business. I have so many conversations with people where they're basically like just burned out working someplace else, where they have a job or maybe they're getting laid off. And it's one of those two things. I'm just like, I'm done with what I'm doing or I'm getting laid off. You know what? I'll just buy a franchise, thinking that that's their solution. And it's not a solution. It's not necessarily a solution, because the impression is if I buy a franchise, it's automatically, I'm out of whatever my problems that I have right now, but it's a whole set of issues and challenges that you're not ready for if you haven't done it before. So I think that's the first thing, is really making sure that you're making a decision with your eyes wide open. If you're leaving something to go into franchising, or you're just getting started, what are you looking for? You've got to identify that. Are you just looking to make money? Are you looking to be in a particular industry? Do you have a certain interest that you have? Like, you're an athlete, so you only want to find something that is in fitness or in training and development for, young athletes? Or are you looking to have an impact on people, like, some sort of cultural impact, some benefit, whether it's you're a connoisseur of food and you love food and pizza, or you just want to make people's lives better. But, you've got to figure out, besides leaving what you have, where do you want to go? and what you want to do to break down the 4,000 franchises that are out there, just to start shrinking it down somehow.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my Franchisee Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. So the first thing is, like, should you really leave your day job ever? And should you leave that to be an entrepreneur? Like, do you want to be an entrepreneur or a business owner? Like, get honest with yourself about that. And then what's the better option, franchising or buying an existing business? I think those are probably the two kind of main things, and they both are great and have their sets of challenges. Both of them do. And Cody Sanchez is really good about helping people kind of understand, like, getting into some of these, blue collar, ugly businesses. Cody's amazing at that. I've spent some time with Cody, and I really like her. Roland Frazier's another one that kind of helps people buy existing businesses or go into a business broker. That's an option. You are on your own out there once you do that, but you have a pretty clear understanding of the financials and the history of that particular business, which is a plus in my mind. But now if you go the franchising route, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. So unpack that franchising. Like, why would somebody or should somebody choose the franchising route or not choose that franchising route? Going back to that first question, our first rule of, should I be in the franchising world or not?
A lot of people try to dip their toe in it. They're like, well, I've got a job. I'm just going to open a franchise and then I'm going to go that way. And I think that's challenging. If you're going to go into franchising, you are an operator. No matter what the brand is, you are going to become an operator. Unless you're somebody who's going to go and buy a large multi-unit platform that's already there, then you're really buying a business that's sort of established and you can step in more of a corporate type role. Otherwise, when you're opening new units or buying a single unit, you've got to be committed to it. It is your child. And all these brands that come out and say it's absentee ownership, it might be absentee ownership once you really learn the business and you can train people how to do it. But the only way for you to be able to do that is you need to be in it on a day-to-day basis and run it and live it yourself to understand the business model and what it takes to make it successful. So, you can't dip your toe into it. So if you're going to do it, you've got to commit to it, because it's going to be time and money and family that's really going to be a big part of it. And that's any business in America, right? In this country, you're not going to get into something as a part-time job unless it's, owning an ATM machine and, just set someplace. But if you're doing this thing and you want to make a living, you've got to be real about that. And you got to realize the commitment that's involved with it. And then whether it's franchising or not, you got to realize, like, franchising comes with a lot of costs. And you've got to be ready to be able to deal with those things, which is another reason why you need to be in the day-to-day operations to understand those costs that you have from franchising versus not franchising. If you can buy an open business, you get that startup from the person who had built the business before, then you're stepping in. You need that education. So you need to understand what all the costs are coming from when you open the franchise and what they're charging you for.
So I was talking with a brand yesterday or the day before, and I talk to brands seems like every day, new brands every day, at least several times a week, a new brand that I get introduced to or reaches out to me. And I was talking to a brand yesterday, and it's very semi-absentee. They are targeting their franchisee avatar is somebody that has a day job, and they prefer them to keep their day job because they can slowly ramp up that business. And so that's their model, and that's what they like. And because that's what the founder did. The founders traveled all over, still travels all over, and they've got this really great lifestyle business, and they turned it into a franchise. And they've got franchisees that are doing it as a lifestyle business. My question was, who is your best franchisee? Your most successful franchisee? And they said, oh, he's a full-time franchisee. He lost his job a couple months after starting, and so he's full-time into it, and he's doing great. I'm like, don't you want more people like him? So even if a brand is semi-absentee, very semi-absentee, or pretty passive, does not mean like that's the best model for that. You got the operator in there now that took the risk. He lost his job, had to go all in, and is doing well with it. So I think that's one of my takeaways too, Joe, over the years is I've lost money in franchise. I've lost money in, I've lost, multiple six figures, easily like multiple high six figures, by just being in the wrong brand. Or that's my perspective. Or if I look internally, I made mistakes by getting into this brand, and there are things that I'm doing differently today because of that. And the brands that I'm involved with today as a franchisee, I am passive. I'm a passive owner because there is an active operator who is an owner in that business. And that's the only way I'll do that moving forward. So my big lesson is, even if it's semi-absentee, I need to have a partner who is an active owner in that business. And it's very clear that they are the owner-operator of that business. And I'm all passive. I am the investor. So that's the way that I've seen it work for me. Not saying that's the only way that it will always work for everybody, but some of my lessons, losing multiple high six figures, if I had that frame of mind going into it 20 years ago, I would have probably had a couple extra $1 million in the bank account.
I agree. I mean, we both seen the good and bad of franchising. And I think what's important, and you might be hitting on something here, but if you're going to be an investor, you need to have somebody who is really bought in and is a true operator. I mean, like, look at one brand that everyone talks about, like, it's incredibly successful, Chick-fil-A, right? I mean, we said we're not going to talk about a lot of specific brands, but I think this is okay because it's outside of our realm. But Chick-fil-A is an interesting model because they are of the belief that you have to be an operator. And they very rarely, from what I understand, give more than one license to a person. You are basically buying a job with that brand, and that is their model. You know you are going to be operating 6 days a week, and you've got to be there, and you're going to make good money if you follow their model. And it's very little, it doesn't cost much to buy in, but their whole thing is Chick-fil-A is really the investor, and they've got the model and the processes, and you're a pure operator of that single location. And that's the way it's really, someone's got to be in there and operating. You can be an investor in franchising, but you've got to have somebody that is there operating these things on the ground and learning the business. And
let me dive deeper into my, as you were saying that, I want to dive deeper into my playbook for that right now, because I think you brought up some good points. I look at the brands that I'm involved with are brands where franchisees are proven to make money. The franchisees are making money. And I know that because my business partners have been in that brand making money and know everybody else in that brand making money, and not just for a year or two, but for years. And they are consistently making money because they are operators. So proven brand that where franchisees are making money, my operators in that brand are proven in that particular brand and are making money themselves. And then we're like, hey, let's grow a larger market together. That's when I partner with them. That's my ideal playbook today. It's safer. safer than just going into, otherwise I'd be betting on myself. If I was going to do it by myself as a franchisee, I would have to be the operator. And I was also look back, Sola Salon was one of my more successful ones as a franchisee. We had my business partners, we were all ready to be operators when we needed to be. And 3 of them were local to that market. And there were times when we had to jump in and be operators until we found an amazing operator. The operator is critical. Most of the time, that operator should be the owner.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really important. But I think it's interesting because you're looking for models, and you said that it's proven someone's operating it, they're profitable, and it's been profitable for multiple years. But the other part in there that you need to keep in mind is that the franchisor, their incentives are not necessarily aligned with the franchisee. Just because units are profitable doesn't mean that the franchisor cares about that. At some point, they want their franchisees to be profitable, but you got to realize the franchisors, their incentive is to be profitable themselves, and they don't have to be profitable through the profitability of their franchisees. And there are lots of brands that are like that.
Let's fight. Let's have a fight about this. Let's have some arguments about this right now.
Sure.
Let's dive deep into that. Like, where are is the franchisee and the franchisor aligned, and where are they not aligned? So you start, go wherever. And I'm going to try to bring some different perspective, maybe argue with you a little bit, hopefully prove you wrong. Hopefully you'll prove me wrong, but I think this will be a really good conversation. Where are they aligned? Where are they not aligned?
Well, it depends on what the business is, obviously, and depends on what the revenue lines are for the franchisor. But the number one place is being a successful franchisee isn't necessarily aligned with the franchisor. And the perfect example is royalties. Royalties for a franchisor, franchisors get paid before the government. They get paid before the government, and they get paid before I do as the owner. All they need to make money as a franchisor is revenue. Not profitability, revenue. And that's what they're driving. And then the other part is selling licenses. When you get your license as a franchisee, there is some benefit to it, right? I get a protected territory. I get the IP. I get the business in a box from these guys. But after that, what's the benefit of the territory? Because I might buy a territory for a specific brand, but I'm not protected in that industry. Fitness is an obvious example. Food is the other obvious example. I mean, you go to the franchise conference and it's inundating of all the different brands that are in the exact same industry lines. So you have to recognize that, great, now I'm protected in X brand, but I can still have outside threats on me. And the way the franchisor protects themselves from those other brands is they try to build as many of their units as possible and pushing that speed, because the faster that they can get open, then they can take up space. They can try to suck some of the wind out of that sort of business, whether it's chicken, whether it's pizza, whether it's fitness, whether it's education. They want to grow their footprint. And it's not necessarily aligned. They can be successful by having profitable franchisees, but
so you're saying the franchisor, they are aligned on, there's alignment on revenue. That's where there's some common alignment, but that's not the end goal of the franchisee. The end goal of the franchisee is profitability. The franchisor, the franchisee's profitability does not have an impact on the franchisor's bottom line or enterprise value. Is that what you're saying?
Especially in the short run. My profitability as a franchisee does not impact the profitability of the franchisor. And, the franchisor, their whole thing is, how many units can we get open? And some of them do this. I mean, this is very explicit by some of them. They push development timelines, not based on how successful you are and what they're going to do to make sure that you're profitable, but based on a contractual timeline that you just have to abide by, because they want units.
So where there is alignment in that scenario is validation. Franchisors want franchisees to validate, not revenue, but profitability. So, and there's a lag. At times there's a lag between franchisees buying in, validating, and then they get open. And then if they're not profitable, that's when franchise validation goes down and franchisors stop selling as many. So I would say there's alignment in profitability for the franchisor's desire for the franchisee to be profitable is so they can sell more territories, have good validation.
Now I get to be feisty and push back.
No, we got to end the podcast. Hey, Joe, it's been great having you on. Appreciate you as a friend. We got to go. We got to go. Your turn.
The franchisor, they don't need all their franchisees to be profitable. They just need some of them.
How many do they need?
1, 2.
Okay.
Enough that they can say, hey, here's some people you can talk to, and people will talk to them, and some owners are naive enough, or potential owners are naive enough to think that that's enough. Buyers are naive enough to think that that's enough to validate it. You know, one of the things that you have said this on all of your podcasts and talk to other people is, franchisor will give you a list of franchisees to go talk to. Those are cherry picked.
So franchisors can't cherry pick. They can't cherry pick the now I'm not saying they don't, but they shouldn't. They shouldn't.
But they're not going to give you a list of franchisees, and they're not going to give you the ones that have gone out of business or the ones that are having a bad experience.
Those are in the FDD. You can find those in the FDD.
Yes.
So we agree that there's franchisors out there that, let's say they have 10% of their franchisees doing well, right market, right time, extra help from the franchisor, whatever it is, 10%. So it's a bad franchisor. 10% are doing well, 90% are not doing well. And let's say they are steering people to the 10%. However they're doing it, they're not doing things on the up and up. They're steering people to the 10%, which they're not supposed to do. What's a buyer supposed to do in that situation?
It's that validation, which is key. Is if you're going to talk to those people, why are they successful? Is it because they're strong entrepreneurs, strong business people, or is it because of the brand that they're working with? But the other part that you need to...
Hold on. We'll stop there because I think that's really important. Lean into the steered list that a franchisor gives you. Lean into it. I would ask the salesperson, the franchise development person, why these franchisees? And they're going to say, oh, just because of they're random. Okay. What do you like about these franchisees? What are they really good at? Hear what they tell you, the franchise salesperson, and then really dig in, like what you were saying, to that list. Don't ignore that list. You're talking to some top performers. Find out why they're a top performer. Find out if they've always been a top performer. Find out if they're getting extra help from the franchisor. Ask what kind of help they're getting from the franchisor, and you can determine if they're getting extra help from the franchisor. Are they getting extra marketing money? Are they getting bigger territories? That's another thing I think people forget. These are the successful ones because their territory is like 10 times the size of everybody else's. So those are the types of questions to ask them. Find out the kind of support that they're getting from the franchisor, the relationship that they have with the franchisor. Do they have the founder's cell number? Is there a group that they kind of hang out with that they learn from? And then ask them why they don't think other people are as successful. So those are some of the questions that I would probably have for that group. What about you?
But also, you need to ask them what their background is. I mean, I've seen the reason some people are successul in a franchise is because either they have an ancillary business or a complementary business which supports the business that they're in.
Yep.
Which you always want to find a complementary business, and that's why they're really successful. Or they've got that complementary skill set. Salespeople are getting into these sales and marketing franchises, and if you don't have that background, it's a real challenge. So it's
excellent point.
What are the things that
also, as we're talking about this, I would also ask, do you have a key employee that is just killer? And dive into that, because what if you are in the medical field or you are in some type of field where you need to get referrals from certain places. And that's like a honey hole. Do they have a honey hole that nobody else has? And do they have a person to go fishing in that honey hole that nobody else has? So I'm thinking, do they have a connection into the hospital system where a lot of people get referrals out of the hospital system that help your brand grow? Did they hire a manager away from a major competitor, and 25% of their business came from that key person that brought over all of their friends and clients from that other business? So those are some real things that really don't get uncovered unless you know how to ask that or even thinking about that. So yeah, Joe, I think we're helping some people here. What else?
I hope so, because in that validation, it is, why are you successful? And then what were the risks or what are the challenges that you faced? But then it's also talking to the units that weren't successful, finding them. Whether you go on LinkedIn and do a search for anybody that's been at it, like you said, on the FDD, it'll have the list of the franchisees who have closed. Reach out to them and find out, because again, just because units have closed doesn't mean that the franchise is ineffective. It could be that the ineffectiveness of the franchisor is selecting the franchisee. They just have the wrong people in there. So you really need to dig into both sides of this to be very aware of it. But the most important thing is, it's not a slam dunk just because there are some successful franchisees, and it's not good enough just to talk to people who failed, because if you only talk to people who failed, you're not going to buy into anything. But that also goes back to my first rule of franchiseeing: don't be a franchisee. But you've got to it is that validation information where you're digging in and you're really understanding what are the strengths and weaknesses of that model that you're investing into and you're getting into, knowing whether it's key people, whether it's key markets, whether it's regional. You've got to find the criteria that you're looking for, coming back to like what you want to do to get out of whatever, or to change from whatever you're doing right now.
Here's another thing, and then we'll kind of shift gears in terms of validating the top performers. If you're in a certain type of field where an event, we'll just use restoration as an example. So an FDD in restoration might be absolutely amazing. And you're like, holy cow, this is really what they did. And let's say it's completely accurate that they netted $1 million last year, and they've been in business for 1 year or 2 years. And then you talk to another franchisee that's netting $500,000 their first 8 months in business. And I'm not talking about any particular brand right now. These are just round, big numbers that I'm using. And then you're like, wow, this is amazing. There's not really any validation because it's a newer brand. I'm in. What you didn't know is there was a huge storm that came through and the whole town flooded. So you had to be an idiot to not make $1 million that first year. And then the same with their first franchisee. All of a sudden, another flood happened and they couldn't help but make a lot of money that year. So you really need to dig in. And I would also say compare with other item 19s and see what's out there in the industry. And I've said this on podcasts before too, and I think I've talked about this in our mastermind group. If you are looking at a brand and you are seeing $1 million net profit in that particular brand at maturity, just call it 4 years being open, gross revenue of $2 million or $3 million, net profit of $1 million. So go and look at other businesses that are in that industry and our mom and pop businesses. Do they have those same margins, and where are they different? So you might be surprised to realize like that's not industry standard. So then you need to do a little bit of research on the industry to see if that's industry standard, why or why not. And then you go back and you have a different type of mindset when you're validating. So that's another little tidbit.
And it's understanding that that's really key. Like I actually went through that. If I understood the industry that I got involved with once, I probably would not have gotten into the franchise that I got into, because I didn't understand why this franchise was successful. After I got into it, I learned why it was successful and why I was lucky that I made the right decision. But if I'd actually known the industry, I've not gotten involved with it, and I wouldn't have been successful in that brand. So it's For me personally, like when I'm looking at the franchise, I have my personal main criteria that I'm looking for. First thing is like, what's the industry or segment that I want to be in?
All right. So
Then,
we're shifting gears now into how to select the right franchise, right? So it's like, yeah, I am going into franchising like you've done multiple times, Joe. So you've answered yes to that multiple times, and you might
yes,
do it again, maybe not. But so you're like, okay, at least franchising is a possibility for you.
yes.
Now it's what brand out of the 4,000-ish brands out there should I pick?
And I think that's when you start looking at them. You got to pick your sort of criteria, why you're going to do it, and understanding when you're going through the validation calls, why things are happening. Like for instance, one of the things I learned about is whenever I talk to a franchise, number one charge, you've got your two main charges, your franchise fee and your royalty. And every franchise I talk to, number one question on the call with them, the franchisor during the discovery calls is, what do I get for my royalty? And can't tell you the number of times that someone did not give me this answer. Actually, I can. It's like 0 to 2.
So your question is, franchisor, what do I get for my royalty?
What do I get for my royalty? And what they always say is,
hold on. Before you get into that, what are you really looking for in that question? Like, what's the real question that you have? Or maybe you want to tell me that later because of where you're going with this.
Well, where I'm going with this is, why am I joining this franchisor? Because I can run it. We can all run businesses on our own. So why am I paying the royalty? Or like one of the things I tell them, because this is straight off of the top line of the business. You have to realize that is incredibly expensive. Before you've been profitable, you're paying to the franchisor. So you've got to make sure you have the fat in the business that that the royalty is going to be worth, what is it? The juice is worth the squeeze, right? So when you ask a franchisor that question, almost all of them will tell you it's the brand. It's the brand. And I got some news for you. Brands are incredibly valuable, but when you're a franchisee, the brand isn't really what's valued. It's the operations, it's the business, it's other underlying things that create the brand value. One of the big things I discovered was network value. Like, do we become better because there are more units? Now, you become better when you have more units because the brand gets known, which, there are a couple out there like that, McDonald's stuff. I mean, the big ones. There's brand value in that, and they do national branding. But the other one is, when I open one unit, I open another one next to it. Is there a network value? Do they feed off of each other? Or do I get a benefit running my unit because there's a unit in California? And that can be brand value, but a lot of times some businesses, it's like shared office space. If you get into the shared office space business, the reason I can get a benefit in my unit from the network value is I open one up in Boston. Someone who's visiting that's a member or a partner in the Los Angeles location comes to Boston, and they can visit my location, and I generate revenue off of them. So it's not the brand that creates the value. It's the network aspect that we have a revenue sharing concept across our units. And there's value. So the more units that you get, the more valuable that network value becomes. What else are you getting for your royalty? In food services, you're getting the menu. In other businesses, you're getting programming. In educational businesses, you're getting programming. In the gym business, you could be getting the programming. But if you're or in the fitness business, but if you're in the gym business, you're not getting programming because there is no programming. So what are you getting for your royalty? And it's understanding and driving out what's the value that I'm going to get this, because at the end of time, your franchise agreement is going to expire. And this is the way I always rephrase it to every one of the franchisors, because when they respond with a brand, I'm like, okay, so after 10 years, when my franchise license expires, why will I renew it? Why will I continue to pay you the 4, 5, 6, 10% of my revenue to you? What am I getting for this? Because I've seen franchises where as soon as their license expires, they take off the sign and they go private label because they've already got the customers and they've already got the local exposure. So that indicates that the franchisor wasn't creating value for the franchisee on a running basis. It was merely startup value.
Would you have been able to sell one of your brands that you were a franchisee of? Would you have been able to sell it if it wasn't in that franchise? Or if you would have sold it, would you have been able to sell it for as much if it was a mom and pop versus a franchise?
No, I would not have been able to sell for the
That's
same
value.
That was the value.
That's value.
And the two
Yep.
reasons I had value was they gave me programming and there was network value. It wasn't
Yep.
just the brand ended up having a great name, but that network value I discovered was really valuable, which is the irony of that network value was a lot of owners thought of that as a cost because whenever their members went someplace else, they thought they were losing money. I'm like, no, dude, it's worth it because you have twice as many members as you would in any other segment like this because they can go someplace else and they stay longer. So absolutely, it was valuable because I was in that franchise, and it was the structure that they
real
had.
value.
That was real value.
That's real value, says Joe. But that's what franchisors need to be thinking about. Is it's also value for the buyer of that particular brand of yours as well, because they were able to buy yours, roll that up into a bigger thing to make it worth even more. And later today, we have a mastermind coming up with David Shuck, who's rolled up a lot of Club Pilates. He's into 2 other brands now, and they are, he wouldn't be able to do what he's doing if they weren't in a franchise system. So that's real value. What about early on about avoiding mistakes, lessons learned? Like you get to avoid the mistakes that the franchisor has already made building that thing. Is there value in that to you? Or where have you seen value in that, actual value in that, if you have?
That's big. I mean, if anything, that right there is why you pay the franchise fee, right? I'm paying the franchise fee, which is a set amount right out of the box to get the business in the box. Now, you think about the opportunity cost of the franchise fee. If I can avoid paying, say, $50,000 to the franchisor to learn how to run the business, can I go and run the same business and have $50,000 less in profit in my first year and learn how to run the business and then never pay a royalty after that? That's the big value out of the franchise fee is getting that value, that business in a box, learning from their mistakes. But you've got to make sure that the franchisor is doing that and they're effective in it to teach you how to run the business right out of the gate. Otherwise, you're not getting that value. But absolutely, that is, if anything, that's why people get into franchising, right? Is it should be a proven concept.
And it could be proven even if it's not a large concept, and it might not, so it might be an owner operator that went the franchising route that's amazing at it, and they have some franchising people that are advising them or helping them or on their team that are able to help them understand how franchising works. So you got the industry expert and then you've got the franchising expert kind of combined. That might, and then they've really learned some shortcut. Like they can really help you with shortcuts. They've learned things along the way, and they should be able to tell you some of those things that they've learned along the way. Like they should absolutely know that.
And you have to recognize this on yourself. I've talked to a few people recently, and it was really interesting. They said 2 things. One person I was talking to was like, I will never get into a franchise when it's just starting out, when it's emerging, less than 50 or 100 units. You have to be too entrepreneurial. You have to be an entrepreneur and you're working with them in order to be successful. He's like, I don't want that. I want to buy something that's known and modeled, and all I have to do is operate. The second thing, though, is if you are that person that wants to be entrepreneurial, you don't want to be into a unit that's already built out because, once it's big and they actually have things figured out, you're just going to follow the model, and that's the goal. But as a franchisor, you actually need people when you're vetting the model and starting out to test different things. So you need franchisees that are more entrepreneurial because you actually don't know what works. And that's a big thing to recognize that with, if you're getting into a franchise, what stage are they in and what stage am I in? And we got to align.
And do they recognize the stage that they're in? Because if they're not in franchising, they may not recognize that stage themselves.
Yes. And again, you have these young franchises that are like, we're a franchise. You just got to follow the model. Well, they don't have a model, and they're swinging all over the place, changing their plan, and they're telling everybody to change, and they're taking the franchisees down with them because they haven't figured out the business yet. So they have to realize that they're still entrepreneurs.
Joe, I had somebody come into the franchisor mastermind to talk to franchisors about about kind of understanding your customer base, using surveys to do that, et cetera. They were part of a brand. They probably had about 100 locations. And she was on the C-level team, did a survey, realized that customers on the East Coast had different language than the West Coast. And they had to change some of the language from a consumer standpoint on the two different coasts to attract the right customer for that particular brand. But that's an example of a brand that had been around for probably 7-8 years. Very good brand, very, very good brand. But 7 or 8 years later, realizing they were marketing to the wrong, kind of using the wrong language in the wrong parts of the country to market. So a franchisor needs to be teachable and coachable. I say it a lot in the podcast, but as I'm looking at new brands, it's the industry, the profitability of the founders' locations and the franchisees, but it's the founder. That founder has to be teachable and coachable. And I love hearing brands tell me, Eric, we're talking because I don't know what I don't know. Like, I've been very successful at these different things. I've also made mistakes, and then we point out things that they're doing wrong immediately, and they're like, that's why we need somebody like you at Front Street, because you can help us avoid more mistakes. And that's why they want us at Front Street to get involved with their brand, because we shortcut that process of creating a brand with a lot of enterprise value. But it's the same thing for their franchisees. Franchisees join to shortcut the process, to get to profitability quicker, with less pain, and have a business that's worth more. That's why people get into franchising. Is if a franchisor doesn't recognize that and they don't really help franchisees get to that point, it's a frustrating relationship between the franchisee and the franchisor.
Yeah. So getting to know the leadership team is very important, because you need to know how humble they are and what their background is and experience is in franchising, in multiple units, in process development. With most franchises today, probably marketing as well. The digital space is so key. This isn't 1990 or 1980 where everything is done locally in newspapers. It is all centralized now. Understanding the strengths and the weaknesses and the humbleness of the leadership team around there that's running that brand. And then how are they going to work with the franchisees to develop?
I was just talking to the lady that puts together the Entrepreneur 500 list and all these other lists. And I tried to get her on some good questions, but I said, what are the things that, some of the things that people might not think about that you put weight on and your questions or the data that you look at when you're making that list. And one of the things that she said they're doing is their social media presence, like looking at the different social media applications out there and like, oh, they have, X amount of followers, X amount of engagement, et cetera. And so they're putting more weight on that. But I think marketing, social media, when it comes to franchisors, is such a challenge. Franchisors can really limit your ability to utilize that. And there's some good things and bad things about that, because you don't want as a franchisee, you don't want your neighbor to go rogue because they have, the ability to do whatever they want. You don't want them going rogue on that, but you also want to have enough freedom and flexibility yourself to use different vendors, to have access to certain things within the social media platform or behind the scenes stuff on that. But a lot of franchisors lock people up. They can't really do anything. And some franchisors give way too much freedom and flexibility with that, where their neighboring franchisees who do stupid stuff actually hurt the brand in general. Yeah. So that's a tough one. There's not really an easy answer to that, but marketing, social media, how the franchise or helps you, and then also reading that, how might they be hurting you as well?
Yeah. And that's also going to depend on what's your territory, what's your region, because if you have rogue neighbors, it hurts you. Where if you don't have neighbors and you have a large protected territory, you can sort of protect your island, even if there's some problem somewhere in the franchise system, because a lot of these things are very, very strictly local businesses. I say this all the time, is I'm a local business in the models that I've been in. And it doesn't matter what's happening across the country. I need to develop what's happening locally, and I need help with that. And talking about that, ways to vet this stuff out is, coming back to what's your number one criteria as a business owner. It is being profitable. And no franchisor will guarantee you profitability. Like if you ask them, what will you do to guarantee my profitability? Nothing. In fact, I've had a franchisor tell me this once. It's like, well, wait a minute. We never promised you that it would be profitable. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but that's not really why we got in business, right, guys? It's like, we're all in this to make money. But besides guaranteeing me to be profitable, you need to figure out what are they willing to do to work with the franchisees that are not profitable to get them profitable, or the ones that are profitable to get them to stay profitable, and digging that out in your vetting calls. But also it's identifying this with the franchisor. Like there's underlying mechanisms that you can see that signal whether they're there to support the franchisees. Some models, you've got to buy product from them, and that's what kills the whole model, or it might make it successful. Understanding what your obligations are in terms of what you're buying from the franchisor in their system, and whether it's food services, whether it's retail items, whether it's construction material. One of the things I always looked at was, I know the franchisor is making money on whatever we're buying from them or from the recommended vendors, but when I buy it from the recommended vendor, it should be cheaper for me to buy through that recommended vendor, even with the franchisor making their cut. Otherwise, the franchisor isn't giving me any value. They're just making money for themselves. Can you see that? Is there a way to figure that out? Or development timelines, like how fast that you have to get your first unit open, or if you have X units that you're going to open, what's going to determine that timeline? Is it based on profitability, or is it based on purely time? If it's just based on purely
Let's talk
time,
about that. Let's talk about that. This is where we might get into some good arguments, Joe.
Get better?
Like just get our faces red and start, really get into it. So territories, what's your perspective on a multi-unit development for a brand that you might get involved with?
For me, one of the things I learned was I wanted as big a territory as possible to protect myself from the franchisor, because we have different incentives. And I learned that being with a very good franchisor, and they ended up selling a territory near me that I wanted. So I want to have that protection from my own brand. And the reason for that is because my own brand is the perfect alternative to my brand. It is the perfect competitor. It is identical. So if someone else opens up another one around me, they don't have to make their business successful by being successful. They can make their business successful because I'm successful and suck off of that. So I like that. But the pushback is the franchisor wants your territory to be as small as possible, because they don't want to give you too much power to be able to control an area and not develop according to what they want. And it's how do you get to that perfect balance on both sides, that you have a big enough territory that you get the protection that you want in the area that you want, and you have the ability to be profitable enough to hit the timelines that you're obligated to hit, either getting your first unit open or getting multiple units open. What is that relationship?
So it needs to be a reasonable size, because the other thing that happens if the territories are too big, whether it's service or fitness or whatever, the territories are too big, you will have competition come in there versus another one of your own brand. So it needs to be reasonable. Can't be too small where there's a bunch of cannibalization, but it can't be too large where you don't really have that brand recognition, or the brand's not being built in a market. Or you have lazy franchisees who are happy with making a little bit of money, because there are franchisees that are happy with making a little bit of money. You don't want them, just squatting on areas or having being weak next to you and not really penetrating that particular market. So I think the point there is it needs to be, the franchisors don't want it to be too big. The franchisees always want it to be bigger. And there's a reasonable territory size that works.
And the franchisor is always pushing that growth, right? Because again, the incentives, their perception is if you're not opening fast enough, it's because you're lazy. It's not, and they've got to recognize whether is it the wrong franchisee, or is there something that is stopping me from wanting to make more money because I'm not making money now or something? Because if I'm profitable, I want to open more units.
Or I should. Well, some people, you should, but some people are happy and they don't want to at that point.
Exactly.
Also, a franchisor does not want to have a lot of snows sold but not open. Like that decreases enterprise value for the franchisor. So they have a 12-unit franchisee that's open 2 units, and they have 10 that aren't really open, not meeting development plan. That dings them on the valuation of the franchisor. So that's where but a lot of franchisors don't really pay attention to that until it's time to sell and it's too late. So they're not really thinking about that. They're thinking short-term versus long-term.
How many brands have you talked about that all they talk about is the number of licenses sold, not open? Like that's what they talk about. We've got hundreds of licenses sold, and that's what they hang their hat on. And they miss
and if you're here, and that's not the right metric. That's a metric, but that's not like when I hear a brand tell me that, we are much more interested in how many franchisees you have open. Are they getting open according to schedule? And that's what private equity looks at when they're going to buy out a brand. So yeah, that's where there's alignment. What else?
That's actually a big
Joe?
point, and that's a huge point, I think, right there, because what ends up happening is, as a buyer of a business, when you see all those licenses sold, and this really happened a lot in the last 4 years in franchising, is there's a lot of FOMO. Oh, they sold all these licenses. They're getting sold out. I got to get it now. I got to get it. Yeah.
And it's real. You got 3 people coming to confirmation day in the same market where there's going to be 2 franchisees. 3 people, 2. You have to make a decision. And FOMO is real, and a lot of brands sell a lot of territories because of that. Lots
of it. And this is the part as a business owner is there is no chance of a lifetime. Chances of a lifetime come up every year. So you've got to be patient and make sure you set your standards and have your criteria, based on everything we've discussed today. You've just followed the rules that Erik and I have laid out. You will never make a mistake. Well, that's probably not true, but you've got to go in with your eyes wide open because you've got to have your criteria, and don't be pressured. Don't be pressured. Make a smart decision and understand what you're getting into, whether it's the brand, whether it's the territory, because you'll get pushed into a territory that you might not want as well. I've seen that happen.
But there's brand, like we're talking about de-risking. We're talking about de-risking, ways to de-risk. And the pressure might be real. Just because you're getting pressure doesn't mean it's fake pressure. It might be absolutely real pressure, but you don't have to give into that pressure. You don't have to make a decision for yourself because the deal of a lifetime does not come around just once in a lifetime.
And if you do give into that pressure, you better be prepared to move really fast, because there are brands that, like, I'll never forget, Pinkberry. I was watching that explode 10 years ago. It was like everywhere I went, there was a Pinkberry. They're popping up all over the place in the Northeast here. And then all of a sudden, it felt like all of a sudden one day they were all gone. I'm like you couldn't get a license yesterday, and today they're all gone. What happened?
Yeah.
And it was that FOMO that they were it was printing money at the time. So if you could get in and out quickly, great. But if you end up
the reason that they were printing money at the time is because a franchisee would get in, and in the yogurt space back then, they were making good money that first year, and then competition would come in, and then they started decreasing every year after that. So you had all these franchisees talking about how much money they're making. People would continue to open them up, and then it fell apart.
And then you had all the
territories. You buy 12 territories. When should you get those open? Or should you ever buy 12 territories? Should you buy 3 territories?
Depends on your team.
Let's argue, man. I want to argue. I don't feel like we've gotten in a really good argument.
Want to get an argument? No, you shouldn't buy 12 territories. Unless you've already been in that business and you know what you're doing, you shouldn't buy 12 territories. And the franchisor probably shouldn't sell you 12 territories. The vetting process is incredibly important there. You're going to want to buy 12 territories because you want to buy your protection, but you're going to get pressured. When you have that many units, you're going to get pressured. And that pressure, contractually and business-wise, will force you to make bad decisions. You will end up making decisions that you probably wouldn't make if it wasn't for having those 12 territories.
That's true. I did a 12-unit agreement in 5 years with Sola, and we met our development plan, but we knew that we had to meet our development plan. And we went into it with a plan. We did it, and then we sold the private equity, which was great. But I've been a part of others that have not turned out that way. So as we look at people coming into our brands that are portfolio brands at Front Street, if someone wants 12 units, we're very it would have to be something very special for us to do that. Someone that has industry experience, franchising experience, that has done it before and they've been successful with it. And even better, if they've done it with a brand that's a challenging brand to operate. And if we have an easier labor model, an easier startup and quicker to profitability type thing than the brands that they've been a part of before, that would, those would be things that would help me push me over the edge to help someone get a 12 unit agreement. But in general, like I think 3, 2, I think our average, and I think it's probably not just us, but a lot of people, is like 2.5 territories per franchisee.
With a lot of models, that probably sounds about right. But the other thing with this whole idea of like how many units you're going to buy is on the ZOR side, on the franchisor side, are they equipped to get you open and get you profitable successfully fast enough to meet your timeline? What is their ability to do that? Because it's a two-sided relationship. They've got to have the infrastructure in place to get your unit trained and get your units opened. So you need that because they're the business mind. But you've got to have the skill set and the team and the desire and the want to do that.
What's the one thing that you really want to say or you wish people knew out there about buying a franchise that just doesn't get talked about? We've talked about a lot, but we haven't gotten in an argument, which I'm a little disappointed about. We've agreed on way too much. But I think it's because, we've had these conversations before, and we agree on a lot of the same things. We talked about stuff today that doesn't get talked about a lot out there. But is there anything else that you're like, hey, this is something that people should know before they buy a franchise?
It's hard work. That's what it is. It's not a slam dunk. Even if everything is given to you on a silver platter, it's hard work, and be aware of that. For most of us out there, we are not going out there with these huge trust funds of money that we're going to spend and teams of people around us that are going to operate these things and get these things running. It is hard work. We need to do it ourselves. And it is really important that you recognize that. No matter what the franchisor tells you, in most models, again, there are 4,000 models out there that we talk about that come and go, that 10% are coming and going every year. But you've got to be willing to work and learn and be a part of this business. Don't think it's easy. Definitely not easy.
Validate those numbers in the FDD, validate them against the industry, validate them with franchisees, make sure those owners of the founders of the franchise are teachable, they're coachable, and then the model, the model works. Like you got to research industry besides just franchising. I think that's where a lot of people don't do that. They don't research the industry. They just research franchising. You are at a disadvantage as a buyer out there. I think this is probably the one thing that I would want people to understand that I say in private conversations. You are at a disadvantage buying a franchise. The franchisor gives you the information they want to give you, or they're legally required to give you. Some go above and beyond. Some are amazing at giving information out there and giving access to franchisees and access to really good information to make a really good, well-informed decision because they truly want the best franchisees. There's a lot of them out there that are not that. And you are at a severe disadvantage when you are a buyer. Doesn't mean they're getting into the wrong system or you're not going to make money, you're not going to do well, but you just got to understand you're at the disadvantage. And last, for the good brands out there, it is a mutual decision. They really are looking at you as a partner as much or more than you're looking at them. I talk to brands that don't think that way. They just want a warm body. And I talk to brands that are probably too much that way and they're too picky about their franchisees. So, but just realize that going into it, because what we just shared is absolute like gold. Joe?
To add on to your point there about selecting your brand, it's realizing that the regulations are not in your favor as a buyer. You think that you've got an FDD and you've got all these state laws and it protects you. Don't fool yourself. You really need to vet things really, really adequately, which is like you come back and you're looking at like the item 19. It's supposed to show profitability. but they tweak the numbers. You've got to know that just because it's in the FDD doesn't mean it's helpful for you, because like you just said, they show you the information they want to show you. It is, at the end of the day, even though it's a regulatory document, it's a sales document.
100%. All right, man. That was good. That was fun. Thanks for coming on again.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It's always great talking to you and getting a chance to see your beautiful face. Now we just got to get together in 3D.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.